Basically, Renaissance is the term for the period of history between 1450 and 1600s, and it is considered as the golden era in music history. In this era, musicians and musical life was linked to power and royal courts. The composer depends on the church, that's why most music used are for a religious purpose. This golden era was particularly known for its famous composers, and namely Orlando de Lassus, Giovanni Pierluigi de Palestrina, and Joaquin Desprez, with some of his compositions such as masses, motets, secular, and vocal pieces. Other than this, we can figure out its contributions in music history through the characteristics of this music. In the Renaissance period, vocal music was more important than instrumental music. It has a huge contribution when it comes to rhythm in the melody, imitation, clarity, and balance. And this era is more polyphonic, along with people to create harmony. Baroque period has emerged between 1600s to 1750. So, the word Baroque means decorated. Now, music at this time was very rhythmically interesting, very elaborate. Both melodies and rhythm are set in complex and detailed. They are embellished with ornaments, and those details made it very dramatic. Now, there was a huge turn in the Baroque era where the music that has been written was no longer for just church services. Unlike medieval and Renaissance, most music was for the church. But now, there's a huge rise in secular music. And with that rise in secular music, instrumental music became important as vocal music for the first time in history. Music in this era began to develop sections, slow or fast, and quiet or loud. These sections really demonstrated the elaborateness of the music. In Baroque and Renaissance music, all of the voices were equal, but composers in Baroque era started giving the melody to the higher voice or the soprano, and other usually lower voices would support and complement the melody and the soprano. The Baroque era also gave way to some very exciting new form of music. Number 1, oratorio, which is a series of songs based on the Bible story. Number 2, cantata. It is a story told through the series of songs. And number 3, opera, told a story using set, props, and costumes. And the common in those new forms of music in this era, they all use an orchestra. The focus in the Baroque era was more on expression and enjoyment of music, rather than just having music for religion or for these sacred purposes. Romantic era was about putting emotion back into words. This era was emerged from the year 1820 to 1900s. Music in this era was written to express thoughts, emotions, and feelings. But along with that, many composers wrote nationalistic music to show their patriotism and love of their country. These composers would study folk music of their country and use themes and tonal patterns from that music to influence their orchestral works. Orchestra at this time were exploding. They are significantly larger than the orchestras that we saw on the classical era, and the musical played by the orchestras became much more difficult and technical. Composers would write orchestral music called program music. Similarly, they would write something called a symphonic poem, which was one movement of music that lasts in an hour, and they tell the story of a poem using only music. I think the Baroque era is the most notable in history of music. as it brought much more significant changes and development in music. As I have said earlier, this era is the most decorated above all other eras. Moreover, music in this era is more demonstrated and elaborated, as it promotes expression and enjoyment of music rather than just having music for religion or for sacred purposes alone.